going to start by saying this very clearly. This is not an anti-rescue conversation. The question I believe we need to be asking ourselves, though, is within horse rescues, at what point does it go from a rescue to a business, to a sales horse business? That's the question we need to ask ourselves, because for many years now, there has been birthed this entire industry of people, wolves in sheep's clothing, if you ask me, who have put on the clothing of a rescue. They put on this facade. They act like they're a rescue, but actually they're just flipping horses. And I have no problem with someone that wants to be a horse flipper. If you want to go buy horses out of the sale barn and go sell them, I have no problem with that, right? It's a business model. You do you. And of course, I support ethically run horse rescues. The issue there becomes the entire industry, this group of people who ploy on the emotions of well-meaning people who really want to support people that are doing good, but they're scamming people. They're acting like they're rescuing this horse that is a 6-year-old registered quarter horse that spins and slides and you can ride bareback around, and they're acting like he's going to get shipped to Mexico. That horse ain't going to Mexico. And so in this conversation, I want to have some in-depth discussion around what it looks like to support a real rescue and what these scammers actually look like. Because I believe we do need ethically run rescues in our industry. But having my entire journey gotten started in rescue, having been the guy that didn't grow up around horses, but started volunteering at the local horse rescue where everything started for me, my passion for horsemanship and all of that, there's a lot of issues in this section of the industry. And if we don't address them, if we don't have these uncomfortable conversations, we can't actually fix it. And each one of us can play a role in helping fix this issue by not supporting the people that are acting like they're a rescue when they're just building a for-profit business. And that just as easy as that. And we can also go support the rescues who are actually taking action and executing on their actual mission as a rescue, and they're stewarding their resources well. They're actually changing the lives of the horses that they're dedicated to rescuing. They're actually changing the lives of the local community because they're involved and they're spreading awareness and education, and they're doing things to actually make a positive difference. We should go all in on supporting those. And so I want to dive into this deeper because we have to have these conversations, and then people like you and I, we have to take action in supporting the organizations that are actually making a difference. It's crazy to look back on it now, but I could have imagined how volunteering at the local horse rescue just 5 miles from my house would have changed the entire trajectory of my life. And maybe it didn't necessarily change the trajectory, but it got me on the trajectory that I was meant to be on. And being 16 years old, volunteering at this rescue, many of us know a lot of horse rescues are run by middle-aged women, primarily. And so being 16-year-old boy, right, I could unload gravel out of a pickup truck, and I could pound T-posts, and I could pick up stall mats, and I could do the heavy labor that was hard for those ladies. And so they loved having me around, and I loved being there. And while I was there at that local rescue, the barn that I was volunteering at was just a couple miles down the road. And as I got more acquainted with the horses and their routine, they actually gave me the responsibility of feeding at that barn. And so I would get up early before school, And I would go out to the barn, I'd feed the horses, move, turn them out, bring certain horses in, and then I'd drive back home, get ready for school, go to school. And over the first about 6 to 8 months of being there, I started noticing like, hey, we're a rescue, but these horses are not necessarily finding new homes. And I didn't know, like I did not grow up in the industry. And so I started asking like, why aren't these horses being adopted or finding homes? And they explained to me like, hey, these horses are 2 to 6 years old. They have 20 to 25 years probably left in them for their lifespan. And they don't know anything. Like they know their ground manners. They're easy to be around, but they don't have an education under saddle. They don't have skills that makes them desirable. And I'm a very purpose-driven individual. And when I saw that gap, and I was like, well, I can go develop my skills so that way I can help these horses be more desirable. Because what I saw was these horses that were ready to go to new homes that were not finding new homes, and they were holding spots in the barn that other horses should be coming into. And so that set me on this path of learning as much as I possibly could in my horsemanship to help these horses. And initially that just started with learning groundwork, right? Learning how to teach a horse basic groundwork, learning how to round pen a horse in a very basic fashion. And I didn't have a whole lot of people around me that could really help me learn this stuff. It was honestly a lot of trial and error, right? YouTube was like just barely getting started. And so there wasn't even that much information out there online, but I could, so I could go to, I eventually found clinics and found other people in the industry. But at the end of the day, seeing that need for those horses inspired later on what became our mission, which is to educate horses and people with a lifetime in mind. And as I stepped more into a professional role, as my skills developed and I started getting around better horsemen and started working within the industry, at the very core, even when I was training very high-end dressage horses or high-end Western performance horses, it wouldn't matter what type of horse or how expensive, if it was a six-figure horse or if it was a $50 horse. Educating horses and people with a lifetime in mind is my commitment to making sure that every horse that we work with has an education that they can lean on should they find themselves in a compromised situation, that someone that knows something about horses could work with that horse and go, that horse has a quality education. And their education, a horse's education, is one of their first lines of defense against ending up in a bad situation. A horse that has a really good education oftentimes won't have to be rescued, right? It might end up in a less than ideal circumstance, but if people can recognize the education that horse has, then that horse instantly becomes more desirable because it has that education, it has desirable skill sets that other people can enjoy and benefit from. And so when I realized that, and my mom told me growing up, like, no matter what happens to you, no one can ever take your education from you, right? And I believe that is so true with these horses, is that as owners, as horsemen, as even rescues, right? It's our responsibility to make sure that these horses get the skills that they need to have to make them desirable, because that is one of the most critical things that will set them up for success. And so having got my start in horse rescue, this has made me hypersensitive and hyper aware to the realities of what's happening in this part of our industry. And we need high quality rescues. There are many horses that do end up in less than ideal circumstances that need help. But when we have people that are scamming people, when we have rescues that are not actually running sustainably and able to fulfill their mission, we have a problem. And the horses are the ones that get the short end of the stick. And as a horseman, our dedication is to helping horses, right? And so and we all are horsemen. It doesn't matter whether you have horses recreationally or if you're a professional. We are all horsemen. We are all stewards of these animals. And it's our responsibility to have not just have these conversations. It starts with a conversation, it starts with awareness, it starts with better understanding, but then it has to be followed up with action. And I think that many people in our industry avoid having these conversations, especially professionals, right? Because frankly, this probably is not going to make me any money. In fact, this will probably lose me money in the industry because it'll piss off people that probably liked my horsemanship style but don't like my opinion, right? And that's fine, right? I'm cool with that. I've moved on. I understand that it's part of having these difficult conversations. And a lot of people won't have these conversations because it takes money out of their pocket. But for me personally, what's more important than profit is truth. We have to be focused on the truth. There's nothing more important than us making sure not only are we committed, and when I say committed to the truth, not only are we discussing the truth, but we're committed. We're actually disciplined in the truth, which means we're taking action on the truth. We actually have to go out, and we're going to talk about like what can we actually do action-wise to take action on this. But many people avoid this conversation because, you know, on a professional side, it takes money in your pocket. On a personal level, it just sometimes makes people upset. But it's not just what we say, it's how we say it. And my goal here today is to hopefully have this conversation with you in a way where, as we go through, there's 6 or 8 different points I want to cover that I hope that it reaches as many people as possible. And so if you do get something out of this video, or if you want to see more videos like this, then share it, right? Make sure you've subscribed to the podcast. Make sure you've subscribed to the YouTube channel, right? Go ahead and do it now, right? Because we're going to have more of these out there. We've got a really neat series on a really hot topic issue coming up. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and follow. And then feel free to share this, right? If you listen through the rest of this video and you're like, yeah, I got a lot out of this, go share this with certain people. Go share this on Facebook. Go share this on social media. Go share this with specific groups, you know, wherever you're acquainted that this could benefit, because we need to get truth-oriented conversations out there, and we need to start having these conversations as a whole in an industry, because it's our responsibility to steward these animals. And it comes down to issues that we face in this industry were created by us. And if they weren't created by us and they were created by other people, it's our job to fix them. So we're the ones here now. The responsibility weighs on us. We've got to get after it. So we're going to dive into the very first issue. We're going to take this step by step by step. So I've alluded to the very first issue specifically that we're going to cover here a little bit leading up to this point, but I want to go head first in it, and then we're going to move into number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and so on and so forth. Okay. And so I've mentioned that many of these quote unquote rescues are just sales horse operations. Okay. And some of them legitimately are, because real rescues, unless they have said, hey, we are not a nonprofit, but our actions prove that we actually rescue horses. And I'm a big fan of nonprofits that run like for-profits, and we'll talk about that later. So I don't have an issue with a rescue that is not a 501c3, but what I'm specifically talking about is people that are running sales horse operations, and let's say they either are a nonprofit or they're not a nonprofit, but both of them are putting on the image, the facade, the manipulation that they are an actual rescue. That's where I have a big issue with this, right? And we all should have an issue with this, which is these people that are like, we rescue horses, we're doing all these good things. And they could be a nonprofit or they could be a for-profit. But they're claiming to be a rescue when all they're doing is buying and flipping horses, but they're not using their own money. They're using other people's money, and they're not using the bank's money, OPM, right? They're not using the bank's money. They're not using a lender's money. They're using money from well-meaning people that see their TikTok live, that see their Facebook live, that see their Facebook posts, that see their Instagram posts, and they go, you know what? And they manipulate them. And these people see these posts and they give their money because they're like, I've got to bail that horse out of that auction. I've got to keep him from going down the slaughter pipeline. Oh my gosh, that horse looks so sad. I've got to help that horse get into a better home. And like, we all would want those things for these horses. None of us want a horse to end up in bad circumstances. But when these sales horse people, they're just flippers, but they're worse than flippers because they claim to be a rescue, right? If they just said, hey, I buy and sell and flip horses out of the sale barn, cool, you do you. No problem with that. But the issue is when they claim to be a rescue and they're like, they picture this, they take this photo and they darken the image and they make sure the horse's head is in the corner and they just wait for that moment and they're like, oh, now that's the photo I can post online. Look at this sad horse that's stuck at this sale barn who's got his head in the corner. And they create all this emotion through an image and through the writing because emotional people will give their money. Right? It's like why you listen to a certain commercial online when it's like, in the arms of an angel. I won't make you listen to the rest of my voice, but you guys know what I'm talking about. When you see that commercial and it's emotion, you see the imagery that they put with the emotion of the song and the tone of the music, and because it gets people to give their money, right? But these people are not actually rescuing horses. They take other people's money, $50, $20, $10, $100 at a time, and they tell how they're going to do all of these things, and they keep them posted throughout the day, and then they know full well that they just got all these people to help them buy this horse that they're going to turn around and sell for a profit, but they're going to sell the story of how they helped this horse find a better home and get out of this bad situation when that horse was never in a bad situation to begin with, right? A horse at a sale barn is not a rescue horse. They use emotional manipulative marketing to get people to try to get horses out of quote unquote bad situations that are not necessarily bad situations. Okay? Now, do some horses end up in bad situations? Of course. Do some horses have to be bought out of bad situations? Of course. Not all the time though. Most of the rescuing that can actually be done is not by buying a horse out of a sales ring, right? If a horse is genuinely marketable, genuinely attractive, if the horse was gonna go on a slaughter truck, I'm just gonna call it like it is, that kill buyer would not put that horse on that truck because they can make more money just running it through the sales ring. Like, these people are business people, right? So this whole narrative that is so manipulated, so leveraged, of like the horse is bound for slaughter. I'm not going to put a percentage on it because I'm not going to have an accurate percentage. But the vast majority, like if you ask my personal opinion, I would say more than 9 times out of 10, those horses are not going there. Are there horses that still get exported to the north and the south of the United States for slaughter? Yes, absolutely. But most of the horses that you look online, if you just open your eyes and you look past all the manipulative baloney that is being spewed and you go, you know what? That horse is pretty cute. It has color. It looks pretty decently minded. And if you look at what makes that horse attractive, you can quickly see that that horse oftentimes would never end up in that. It was never going to go on one of those trucks. I'm not going to turn this into a whole slaughter discussion. There are horses that go there, and I do believe that slaughter has its purpose. There's worse thing in life than death. And that could be that, it could be euthanasia, but we're specifically talking about people manipulating people for profit under the guise that they're running a rescue, which they're not doing, right? And that kind of deception hurts the rescues that are doing really, really, really good work, right? And it actually hurts the horses that actually need help. Because why? It muddies the water. It makes it hard to discern between which animals need help and which ones don't need help, which people are doing good work and which people are not doing good work. And so it takes each of us using some discernment to look at a post, to look at an animal and go, you know what are the actions of these people, right? Like looking at the qualifications of a real rescue. Most of them are 501c3, right? Most of them are truly nonprofit. A lot of these people that are doing this are not, because they know if they try to go get a 501c3 and try to run it through there and they do this type of work, they could get in massive trouble with the government for rescuing horses when they're not actually rescuing horses, right? And I believe that, and then the people that do this, but they're running a 501c3 and they're running some kind of tax, I hate taxes, think it's theft, yet we have to obey the law. People that are using a nonprofit status to try to evade paying taxes because they're trying to manipulate the system, I think those people that are running truly manipulative, deceitful sales source programs under a nonprofit, they should be investigated. If they can be proven that they are being manipulated and they're not actually running a nonprofit to the nature of how it's supposed to be run, then they should be investigated and they should have to pay back taxes on all the money that ran through there. Because don't lie. Don't be a thief, right? Don't manipulate people. So it's really important that we get clear on a couple terms real quick. Number one is rescue. When I talk about a rescue, we're talking about an organization, a nonprofit organization that is committed to finding horses in distress, finding horses in difficult circumstances that genuinely need help. A horse in a sales ring is not a horse in distress, is not a horse that just needs help and needs bailed out, but they're actually finding horses that are emaciated, that are being abused, that are neglected, and they're finding these horses that are in bad circumstances, extracting them, getting them out of those circumstances, even if it means working with the local animal control, local judges, and whatever it is, getting people to surrender those horses, and they're getting those horses out of those bad circumstances. They're serving them in the immediate, right? They're going, what do these horses need? How can we best serve them? What is the best thing that we can do for this particular animal? Which means, is it a rehab program? Is it a better, is it nutrition? Is it training? Is it euthanasia? And we're going to talk about that one as well. And they do what is best for that particular animal. And then they create a game plan of finding that horse a home and serving that horse to where they can continue rescuing horses, genuinely rescuing horses, right? And it's important that we don't blur the line between like a rescue and then what these people are doing in flipping horses, because we're going to talk about the reality of like rescues can't save every horse. So there is a level of prioritization that rescues need to have in place when deciding what horses can they help and which horses can't they help, because many horse rescues run into issues of trying to save them all. And it creates a ton of issues for that organization and ultimately cripples their ability to rescue any horses. Okay. And so we need to make sure that, a rescue is not someone that's going to a sales barn, finding a fat horse that has an education, that is in good health, that is desirable, that's a buckskin or a palomino or a flashy chromed out bay or sorrel horse, and then being like, this horse was going to the slaughter pipeline, we got to save him, send me money to my Venmo link, and then telling you, and then turning around and selling that horse for $9,500, right? That's not a rescue. That's a wolf in sheep's clothing. And it's really important that we don't blur the line, because I'm not saying that and I've had a lot of friends that have got horse out of the slaughter pipeline, and are there certain horses that get on those trucks and go north or go south from the United States? Absolutely. And there's some harsh realities that come along with that. The reality is that very few of those horses are actually going to end up, if they're actually desirable, most of the horses that get put on Facebook, they're going to slaughter. They're not. Most of them are not. And so I'm not going to, in this particular part, the rescues themselves have to have clear decision-making protocols on the type of horses and the specific horses that they are or are not able to help, because they've got to be able to make logical decisions in emotional environments. And that part is really, really important to run a sustainable rescue. And it's something I respect from the rescues that are able to do this well, as opposed to the people that are just out there scamming people. And I want to shift our focus here for a minute to the horses themselves and the impact that humans' actions have on these horses when we are falsely labeling horses as abused or neglected or doomed, or, oh my gosh, they need to be rescued, but they're not abused, neglected, or need to be rescued. Because this happens time and time again, and we've already talked about how not every horse in a sale pen needs to be rescued. And that really comes down to the fact that many people might disagree with how someone else trains a horse, manages a horse, whatever. And they're like, well, because I disagree with that horse, or they'll talk about Mustangs, right? The Mustangs need to be rescued, right? The ones that quote unquote need to be rescued are the ones that may be starving out on the range because they're overpopulated. But they don't need to be rescued. They need to be properly managed, right? And the core that I'm getting at here is that we have to be objectively truthful in how we are looking at these problems. And because there's so much emotion wrapped up in rescuing horses, is that those emotions so many times cloud the truth. They cloud our vision and our thought processes as humans to what is true. And this has a massively negative impact on real rescue work when it comes to horses. And when we have horses that are labeled as, oh, they're abused or they're neglected or they need to be rescued, and they're not actually abused, they're not actually neglected, they're not actually doomed, right? They're not actually in need of being rescued, then it creates all this noise. And people are like, oh my gosh, I rescued this horse or I rescued that horse. And it's more, the human does that because they want to feel good. I rescued this Mustang. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. If you bought a horse out of a sale, it's like you didn't rescue that horse. You might feel like you're giving that horse a better life. Okay, cool, for you, right? But you're not rescuing the horse that you spent, $9,500 on at the horse sale or $5,500 on at the horse sale. You're not rescuing that horse for that price. Okay? Rescue horses, it's not how it works, right? But when we say those things and we project these emotional beliefs that are not true beliefs, but they're emotional beliefs of the horse is abused, the horse is neglected, the horse needs to be rescued, it dilutes the work that real rescues are doing. Because real rescue work is hard work. Real rescue work is highly emotional. Real rescue work is truly meaningful. And when people are out there on social media virtue signaling and acting like they're doing something good when they're actually not doing the thing that they say that they're doing, it dilutes the true quality of the real rescues that are out there doing the work that they're doing. And then you have the flip side of people that are acting like they're rescuing horses and they're not rescuing, but they're manufacturing urgency. That when people are out there like, oh my gosh, we got to rescue this horse, we got to be quick, Venmo me $100, right? And they're creating this false sense of urgency. It creates a lot of long-term problems because it's like crying wolf. And it's like people are like, oh, we need to help this one. Oh, we need to help that one. Oh, we need to help this. But they're not horses that actually need rescued. So then when a rescue that is legitimately has a horse in front of them that they need help with to pay for whatever it might be, right? To help to truly rescue a horse out of a particular situation, because so many other people have been crying wolf, their message gets diluted. And the horses that actually need help can't get help because humans are out there virtue signaling and wanting to feel like they're doing a lot of good things, right? And when we put our need as humans for a hit of dopamine so that we can feel good about what we're doing with our horses, and this is what creates so many behavioral issues with horses, management issues, training issues, mental stability, emotional stability issues with horses. It comes from people just wanting to feel good. And what should feel good is doing what actually makes a difference, what actually serves others. And therefore, if we are constantly seeking the thing that makes us feel good, and we're posting on social media about how we rescued this horse, but we didn't really rescue this horse, we're being selfish. And that selfishness harms others around us. It harms the efforts of real rescues. It harms the horse that is in need of rescue from actually getting the help that it needs. And so it all comes down to us being truthful and objective. And there's nothing wrong with you going and saying, hey, I bought this horse because I didn't like the position that it was in. I didn't like its situation and I thought I could give it a better deal. But that's not rescuing. That's you making a decision to make a financial transaction, because at the end of the day, if horses are being, like, everyone can, I believe that there are some baselines to how horses should be managed. They should have enough food and forage, and they should have access to some friends and socialization, right? And they should have a clean environment. But whether your horse is a show horse that's in a stall the majority of the time or turned out all the time, I believe that we can have a difference of opinion in management styles because there's nuance, there's context that's needed for that. But at the end of the day, we have to meet the needs of the horse. And there's many ways to do that. While to serve the horse, there's not just one way to do it. But many people get the idea that, oh, well, if it's not done my way, then it's not the right way. And that's just not true, right? It's just not true. When we can start to tell that there's actual issues is if the horse is suffering, right? And I say that with some air quotes, like if the horse's lifestyle is not optimal and the horse is having some physical issues or some emotional issues or some mental issues, then yeah, we could improve that horse's lifestyle. But we have to stay objective and say the horse has to come first. We can agree that there's different ways to do things and still put the horse first, and we don't have to agree with how everybody does things. But do not go out there virtue signaling about how, and we shouldn't tolerate people virtue signaling about how this horse, because here's taking this a layer deeper, and then we're going to move on, which is having got started in rescue and been involved with people that have rescued horses, and I say that with air quotes, and I've been involved with people that have actually rescued horses. The horses that have come from a true rescued situation and had a true success in a second chance at life are the ones that landed with humans that allowed them to move on from their previous experiences. But the humans that continue to push the story of what happened and why it happened and how horrible it was, of all the things that happened to this horse, that continue to push the past onto the horse's current present moment, are the exact humans that never allow that horse to move on, and that horse is stuck in its past. And the horse struggles to move on because the human continues projecting on that horse, and therefore the horse continues having behavioral issues and physical issues and emotional issues and trainability issues because the human never lets the horse move on. But the humans that allow that horse to move on and don't make excuses, and they serve the horse that they have in front of them today, and they look to a better future, and they look to a true second chance, and they set that horse up for success, the past can stay in the past, and the horse can have a more peaceful present moment in that horse's life. And that is what we all should be striving for with all of our horses, rescue or not. But those that continue to project the past onto a horse's current present moment are arguably just as cruel as the people that allowed that horse to end up in initial situation to begin with. Because how cruel is it to never allow a horse to gain true mental, physical, emotional health because you keep projecting the past and making excuses and not giving real support and not truly serving the horse that is in front of us today. That is cruelty. So you probably got the idea that I'm really big on say what you mean and mean what you say. And that second part is really important because when you mean what you say, you back it up with action. And so when we're diving into a rescue truly being a rescue, we have to look at the operations that allow it to still fulfill that mission in rescuing horses. And one of the biggest issues I see in rescues is the fact that some of them will try to save them all. And they approach every horse that they come across like, we got to save this one, and we got to save that one, and we got to save this one, and we got to save that one. And they try to save them all. And that principally, if that is not defined within the rescue, the understanding and the expectation and the reality of we can't save them all. Therefore, we have to have a protocol in place that allows us to make critical decisions in emotional times of when we can't save a certain horse. Because the idea that we can save them all is extremely harmful. It will cripple the rescue's ability to actually rescue horses in need. Because what ends up happening when an organization approaches every horse like they can save every horse, and they try to save every horse And I'm not saying that it's not a valiant effort, right? Like it's an understanding. I want to make this clear. Like, it's understanding of why we would want to do that. As horse people, we would want to be able to help every horse. But the fact of the matter is that it's not possible. And so when a rescue tries to help every horse along the way and they don't prioritize, they don't have the key decisions made, they don't have a decision tree, if you will, on how they're going to decide how they proceed with different types of situations and different types of horses, then what ends up happening is horses continue to come into a rescue and they end up with horses that are very difficult, if not impossible, to actually end up adopting. And so they they go from a rescue to almost a retirement center when it's a rescue. And it's like, if you're going to be a retirement center, then be a retirement center, right? Be a sanctuary and just say, listen, we have a sanctuary and the horses that come here will die here and they'll have a peaceful passing and they get to come here and live out their days. And we can only take 25 horses. So we are a sanctuary capped at 25 horses. If we have 25 horses on our place, we are full and we're fulfilling our mission of being a sanctuary for those 25 horses. Call a spade, say what you mean and mean what you say, and be what you are. But when we're specifically talking about rescues who are supposed to be in the business, if you will, of rescuing horses, which means they need to be capable of helping horses that are in need. But when they try to save every single one of them with no decision-making protocol, then they end up basically hoarding horses that needed help, but maybe were not horses that were the right ones for them to be helping because maybe they don't have the program or the resources or the know-how or the network to actually get that horse what it needs so it can move on. So it can find another home, right? And when this happens, when rescues run in this manner, where there's no strict protocol and decision-making around which horses they help and which ones they don't, right? Then they cannot fulfill the mission as a rescue. And then they fill up and they're no longer a rescue. They're no longer available. They're constantly maxed out. They're maxed out in space, they're maxed out in resources, they're usually running short on time and running short on money, and everything looks like an entire dumpster fire because there's no real structure. There hasn't been objective, logical decisions made in calm times that can be there to guide the rescue when things catch on fire, right? Like when people call and they're like all emotional, they're like, oh, we need help. There needs to be protocols in place so that they can guide, so they can help. And that doesn't mean when a rescue is like, hey, we can't help with that particular situation, that's when it's important for them to have a network of other organizations, of other humans that could help, right? That way they can all work together because it's important that there is structure so that the organization can stay in alignment with their mission and they can stay focused as a rescue on doing what they do really, really, really well, right? And then allow other people to do what they do really well, right? But this idea that we can save them all as a rescue is not feasible. It's not possible. And not all of them should be saved, right? They might be able to be saved from a bad situation, but perhaps the next best thing is that they're allowed to pass on. You could still call that saving that horse, being the one that makes the hard decision of saying, you know what? The best thing in this horse's case is that they get to move on. They don't have to struggle. They don't have to suffer. They don't have to be in pain or whatever the case is. That's called being a good steward, right? But we can't be a good steward of the horses in a rescue sense if we don't have real structure, so that we can actually be successful in fulfilling the mission that we have. And I was just mentioning how making those tough decisions of allowing a horse to pass on, getting that horse out of a bad situation, and then making the hard, tough decision to allow that horse to pass on, to euthanize that horse, right? To put that horse down, to put the horse to sleep, if you will. trying to use some terminology that if you're listening to this and you're unfamiliar with the terminology, that you understand what I'm saying. We have to understand there's worse things in life than death itself. And euthanasia in the rescue world is such a taboo topic. And I think that it should be one of the most talked about topics so that people understand why these difficult decisions are so important. And many times, because we have been blessed to be stewards of these animals, we have to make tough decisions, and decisions that many times other people won't agree with. There's that whole poem of being the man in the arena. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves that it's easy to cast judgment on other people who have had to make tough decisions with the outside perspective, without being in the heat of the moment, without actually knowing all the information and the context around that situation. It's easy to judge another person's decision. But if you were to be the man in the arena, you cannot be so naive to think that you may not do the exact same thing if you had all the information, if you were in the moment, and those types of things. And so I don't find that it's productive whatsoever to go judging, per se, other people that might have to make a difficult decision of when to put down a horse. And I think because this topic is so taboo, it's all the more important that we actually discuss it. Because, as we said, there's worse things in life than death itself. A horse that is crippled, chronically in pain, without the ability to actually get that horse comfortable. One of the best things we can do is put that horse down, right? If the pain cannot be managed, and some people might go, well, you could put them on all these pain meds. Yeah, and then the horse has massive gut health issues, right? They have ulcers. So now their stomach hurts. Now they're having trouble eating food, digesting food, right? There has to be an evaluation, and this is a subjective thing. This is a personal thing of the overall quality of life. And I certainly personally will tell you that I'd rather put my horse down, or put any horse down, when it is sunny and 72 and a nice light breeze and a beautiful day. I'd rather have to make that tough decision to put them down on a good day than have a horse go down in the mud on a rainy, dreary, muddy, wet day when they've fallen, they've thrashed, they can't get up. And now I have to do it, but now I've got to wait on the vet, or now I've got to do it myself because I wasn't a good steward and I didn't use some foresight. I didn't use some wisdom and some discernment and some vision to go, you know what? This horse is probably going to struggle to make it through the winter. They may not make it through the winter. And the risk that this horse actually goes down this winter is not worth that horse's suffering. So I'm going to have enough respect for this animal to give them the best life we possibly can, and then make the tough decision on a good day. And some of you might drastically disagree with me on that, and I totally respect it. I totally respect it, right? But I believe that it's so important we separate the emotional discomfort, because if my inside gets tight, my gut gets tight thinking about having to put down some of my horses. But to put down any horse, it's a being, right? Horses are amazing creatures. We don't, in a way, I was talking about their past before, not letting them escape the treacherous, horrible, maybe difficult past that they have, but maybe they also were some kid's favorite horse or somebody's favorite horse in the barn, and then something happened and they ended up in a bad situation, but they used to be the light in somebody's life. And then they ended up in a tough situation. And now maybe you have to be that person that decides to put that horse down. And it's easy to look at what is in front of us, but we don't know what's behind us. And sometimes behind some of those horses are amazing memories. And we have to allow ourselves, I think it's important to recognize the good with the difficult, right? And it is extremely emotionally uncomfortable when we have to make those decisions of, is this the right time to put this animal down? But we have to understand that it is oftentimes, that's not the worst thing that could happen. And oftentimes it's one of the most humane things that we possibly can do. And if we are truly being good stewards to these horses, it's not about what makes us most comfortable. It's about what's doing right for that animal. What is the best thing for that horse? What are we supposed to do to take care of this horse? We are trusted to be the caretakers of these animals. And if there's nothing we can do to help that horse, and that horse is going to continue to struggle and suffer, perhaps it is time. And some people will be like, well, we'll never put a horse down on a good day because that's not our call and we're not God. You're right, we're not God. But we are called. We were given dominion over these animals. And to avoid being the one that calls that shot. So what do you want them to do? Because how they die in the wild, if you're like, I'm not going to be the one that makes that, you don't. And here's the thing: I'm not saying you're not going to be the one, but if you're going to be the one, if you're going to be somebody that says we shouldn't be putting these animals down, okay, so how they die in nature is pretty horrific. Because a lot of times they'll get crippled, they'll struggle to get feed, they might starve to death, they might can't get to water, so they die of dehydration. Right? Maybe they get attacked by a predator, right? Like if we allow these horses to die naturally, if you will, it can be a pretty damn barbaric thing. Perhaps very few of them actually just lay down and go to sleep and don't wake up. Many of them struggle and suffer all the way through. We have the blessing to have the dominion over these animals to give them a peaceful ending before they have to experience all that turmoil. And if there are people that try to avoid euthanasia or putting a horse down in any type of form at all costs, and that is a true animal welfare issue, right? That's not good stewardship. The most important thing that we need to do for these animals is to be good stewards. And that comes with making difficult decisions. That can mean, having a foal that has a deformity and not sinking tens of thousands of dollars into a foal, but rather maybe letting that horse pass on, right? And I think part of this, there are people out there that have the resources to do things for their horses, like corrective surgery, but they have the resources. So I'm not including that in this. When I'm talking about rescues specifically, that are in the mission of helping as many horses as they possibly can get out of bad situations and end up in better situations, then that's what we're focused on, right? We can get lost in all the nuances, right? Of someone that has a foal born that had a deformity and they were able to do corrective surgery to its legs and then the horse went on and was successful. That's awesome. If the person has the financial resources and the team and all the things to support that horse, an amazing blessing. That could be, you could argue that is good stewardship because it's utilizing the resources, right? But that might be a high-end performance horse or a high-end sport horse or something like that. Or maybe it's just the horse they dreamed of. Fine. If you have the resources, use the resources the way that you feel called, led to do it. But then I do believe a lot of times in these rescues, the emotions lead the decisions, and then oftentimes the resources are not stewarded appropriately, and it causes the rescue to be constrained to where maybe that the animal continues to suffer for longer than it should, or the financial resources of the organization get drained, and now they're not in a position to where they're prepared to help the ones that they actually could help, that have a better chance, right? And so we have to make these difficult decisions. We've already talked about the importance of having a healthy structure in an organization or in a business, if you will, and specifically in this case, in rescues. And what came to mind is that cliche saying that many of us have heard, maybe all of us have heard it, which is you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And I'm not going to get into a whole business conversation around this, but we talked about being able to make critical decisions and having a system in place for how we make difficult decisions in the case of like rescues in this case, because there's a lot of emotion. And the goal, right? We don't rise level our goal. The goal is to help, as a rescue, is to help as many horses as possible. We don't rise to that in the moment. We'll fall to the level of the system. And I keep saying we in this, guys, because we're horse people as a community. While my business is a for-profit business that serves other horse professionals, and I do my best to have these difficult conversations and put out horsemanship information to help rise the tide of the entire industry, I keep saying we because we are all responsible for these horses as horsemen and women, right? It takes all of us working together and being like as many of us as possible, getting aligned with the truth. And so if we're looking at donating time or resources to our organization, it's important that we recognize that a rescue has systems in place that allow them to achieve the goal that they have within the rescue, right? And we've already discussed the difficulty that happens when rescues are run purely on emotion, right? When it's straight up emotion and there's a lack of systems, things get scattered, resources are depleted. There's constantly a lack of time. There's a lot of scarcity, right? Because running on emotion is not sustainable. And it causes people to make emotional-based decisions that causes them to not be good stewards of time, finances, resources, network, volunteers, staff, all of these things. But rather, having structure and systems in place allow there to be structure and systems that prioritize the actions so that the actions result in the goal, result in fulfilling the mission. And this is why rescues and nonprofits, why I believe they should be run like a for-profit business. They really should be run like a business. And people are like, well, they shouldn't be for profit. They should be managed with the same type of structure and systems that a for-profit business would have, so that there is an emphasis and prioritization on getting the biggest ROI possible. The ROI being towards achieving the mission, not a financial ROI, but the biggest ROI through the actions of systems, structure, people, staff, volunteers, all the resources that go into the organization to where there's as much impact and result in achieving the mission as possible, right? A lot of times think like, oh, business is just about making money. No, a business should be about fulfilling the mission of the business, about serving the people that the business was built to serve. A rescue is built to serve horses. A horse rescue is built to serve horses that are in need of rescuing. So therefore, all action systems and structures in place should be aligned to make sure that that is possible, which means that you should be like, how do we get every dollar to go further? How do we maximize the talent of our volunteers or the talent of our staff? How do we run a schedule that is good steward of our time so that we get the most done in the amount of time that we have? Businesses that are for profit do this because if they don't, they're losing time, losing money, and it's not sustainable, right? A rescue should be doing this because then as someone that would want to donate to an organization like that, then I know that my money is going to go further because there is a system and structure in place that allows that money to have the biggest impact possible, right? It makes these nonprofits way more sustainable because the number one need that you hear from nonprofits, that I hear from nonprofits at least, is we need more money. We need more funds. We need more people supporting our cause. So what do we need to do? First, in order before we can why would God give us more resources if we're not stewarding the resources that we currently have? We got to take responsibility and go, how can I be a better steward of what I currently have? And when you start to do that, and you can communicate that as a rescue, as a nonprofit to your base, to your audience, and you can showcase how you're able to help your resources go further, that builds the confidence in the people that want to give, that they know that their financial resources or their time resources or their network that they're willing to donate to you is going to go to actually achieving some results, and it's going to go further, right? And that's one of the most important things, and it's attractive to donors. And then you can have more money, but then you won't just hemorrhage that money and you won't just let it blow out the back door. You'll actually get more done with it. And so, but many nonprofits go, we're a nonprofit, which means we just spend all the money. It all goes out the back door. It comes in, it goes out, and we constantly need more. And it's like, every business needs to make more money. Every nonprofit will benefit from having more money, but we have to have systems and structure in place that allow us to be good stewards of the resources that we have, so that as more resources come in, we have a plan for those resources. We know how to utilize them. And so as a nonprofit, if there's extra money, if there's more financial resources coming in than was planned to be used, now there's opportunity. An abundance of resources gives the rescue more opportunity to continue serving more horses, right? And there's so many ways that can be deployed to still achieve the mission. And I contemplated whether I should dive down this rabbit hole of money within nonprofits, but we've already talked about the systems and the structure in it, and we started talking about the financial aspect. And I think it's one of the most important investments that many nonprofits can make is in their staff and in their team. And some rescues, some nonprofits are completely volunteer run, and that can work well if that is that organization's style, right? But this is not about a rescue profiting, right? This is about rescues having the financial resources that allow them to have staff or team members or volunteers that are able to focus and be present and dedicated to fulfilling the mission of the rescue, right? And so when a rescue has an abundance of resources, they should pay their staff well. And I'm not talking about paying the president of a nonprofit rescue, $5 or $10 million a year. Like, that's ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. Wrong. Should not be happening. Right? But the idea that people should be expected to just scrape by and be like, I'm going to do this rescue work because I love it. I'm going to work for this organization, but I'm only going to make $25,000 a year. The rescue should take responsibility for paying their team well. Because if your team is able to show up and be focused and be present and not be financially strapped, but able to show up and do their best work, right? They're not there for the money, but they got to have money so that they can live comfortably and they can do their best work, right? And so that's where I think it's really, really, really important, because I see so many rescues, especially if the person that started it is struggling financially, then it cripples the organization, because usually the person that started it has this passion, has this conviction, is making sacrifices, but at some point they need some form of income. Like if they're struggling financially, and I'm saying this because I know there are some really good rescues out there where the founder, the owner, the main operator is struggling financially. And it's like, do not feel bad for making sure that your ends and your needs are met, because when they are met, then you are able to be more present and be focused and do a better job at actually fulfilling and serving the mission of the rescue, right? And so rescues should prioritize making sure that they're running efficiently. Like, you shouldn't have more staff than you need. You shouldn't be paying more than you need to, but you should be paying reasonable wages, because then you get consistency. And if we want to actually fulfill the mission of helping horses, we have to be consistent, And that's so important. And so the next thing is, like there's other ways that money comes in outside of donations. You got adoption fees, right? And you do have people that donate on a monthly basis or write a check a year or whatever the case is. And there's different models to doing this. And I honestly don't have a problem with a rescue pricing a horse, an adoption fee on a horse at fair market value. Because if they're able to get more than just a $500 or $1,000 adoption fee for a particular horse, they have more financial resources to reinvest in the rescue's mission, right? And so this is, again, the posture, the position of the organization. If I'm not talking about people that are flipping horses and then just selling them at high dollar retail value, right? That's just sales horses. But I'm talking about rescues. Like if the rescue says, man, this horse is really nice, and we've poured into it, and it has a good education and all these things, and this horse is truly a good individual, they need to place an adoption fee that is going to find that horse a home. You don't want to just be sitting on that horse longer because you're hoping to get $10,000. You need to put an adoption fee that is reasonable, that will get that horse moved into a new home. That way the next horse can come in. But you should try to, I believe that they should try to maximize the amount of money that they can get from adoption fees, which oftentimes still falls short of the investment that they have in rehabbing in that horse and helping that horse have a second chance. Still falls short. But the more that they can get back on that adoption fee, the more financial resources they have to reinvest in the next horse, right? And then the money goes further. And I personally don't know what you guys, you can let me know in the comments if you have a problem with that, but there comes a level at which we want to make sure that horses are going to appropriate homes, which means that people are, the adopters have the right knowledge, the right skills, the right financial resources to support that horse. And frankly, people that are willing, if they're trying to spend $500,000, it's a little bit of a crapshoot sometimes outside of vetting that person through an application of where that horse might end up. And we don't want that horse to end up in another rescue type situation. That's the job of the rescue, is to vet the people that come through. And part of the vetting process can be like, hey, we're going to ask a little bit more for this horse maybe above the normal adoption fee that is seen, so that way we have more financial resources, and we're also placing these horses in places that have the means to actually support them, right? And so this is not about extracting profit, under the rescue label. There are some people, and I've run into these people, and I have a big issue with this, which is they start a nonprofit so that they can just siphon the funds out the back end of that nonprofit, and they're using that nonprofit as a label. We talked about that as people acting like they're rescuing horses, but I'm talking about nonprofits in general, to where they're not actually focused on the mission at hand. They're more focused on running money through a nonprofit so that it's non-taxable, and then they get these financial gains. And I've talked with people about that, and I have a big issue with it because it's not honest, right? It's not truthful. And when we're talking, what I'm specifically getting into here is a nonprofit focused on maximizing their financial resources and all the other resources, but in this particular segment, money, to where they can reinvest in the mission. And that might be reinvesting in hiring another team member, reinvesting in higher quality hay, panels, fencing, whatever it is. There's so many areas that those finances can go to, not about someone within the organization just trying to financially gain to an extent that it's essentially theft. And I think it goes without saying that none of this information, if you will, matters if we don't actually go take action with it. And I would want to challenge you and encourage you to try to go find a rescue organization in your local area that is doing really good work, and support them. You could support them financially. You could support them with your time. You could support them with other resources or network or any way that you can possibly help them. But we have to, hopefully up to this point, like you have an idea of how to better identify them, but a couple quick ways to kind of look at, like, is this an organization that is doing real rescue work? Is like, I would want to be looking like, how frequently are they adopting horses out? How regularly are they bringing new horses in? How long does the average horse stay at their rescue before it finds its forever home? These rescues are meant to bring horses in, serve them, and get them out and bring one in. And it's really important that they're transparent, right? You might be able to find this through how they're communicating on their social media, how they're communicating on their website, right? Maybe you're able to go to an event or see their facility, right? If there's a lack of transparency, if they won't answer certain questions like what's the average length of time that the horses are in your platform, or how many horses have you adopted this year, or whatever, or if that information is not available, it's one thing, but if they're not willing to give it, that's a big red flag, in my opinion, right? As if you're a rescue person, a rescue organization, I'd highly encourage you, make sure you have a website, make sure that people are able to find the information that they need to on, we've helped this many total horses since we've been founded. We've helped this many horses this year. The average horse that comes into our organization is here for this amount of time. It costs approximately this much money on average for us to bring a horse in to all the way to the point of adoption, right? This is out of every dollar given, this is how much of your money goes towards the horses or to these different situations, right? Versus admin costs, right? I think as a person that would be willing to donate, I'm not opposed to there being admin costs. I just don't want 90% of my money to go towards paying people's salaries, right? So the transparency comes in, I think, as a person that is willing to support organizations, we have to look for these things, the level of transparency, the reasonability that they're moving horses in and out and they're truly functioning as a rescue. And my brain always goes to speaking to the organization owners or the people that are running these organizations because I want to help, right? So that's why I say, like, you should have a website that have these things on there because it provides the transparency, right? Now, understand if you reach out to an organization, they don't have a website, they only have a Facebook page, and you're like, how many horses have you adopted this year? And you ask them 20 questions, they might go like, why is this person grilling me with all these weird questions? And they might lack foresight that you might be willing to write them a check for $1,000 or $10,000. And it's in their best interest that they answer them, but it's also in their best interest that they have a site where they're able to have this information displayed, right? And so transparency is really important, but so are results. The results that these organizations are getting, right? The reputation that they have in the local community. What are other people saying about them? You know, are they truly living up to it? Listen to other people that are that know them, that are aware of them, right? And make sure that you get a diverse set of people to answer that, not just people that are the mom of the person that founded the organization, right? And so, like, all that's really important because the really good rescues need our support, right? And the people that are out scamming people, you should turn their back, block them, tell people the truth. You know, I don't necessarily believe in kicking people's sandcastle over, but I definitely believe in telling people the truth when the opportunity comes up. And as we've clearly covered, so many of the issues that hold rescues back from fulfilling their mission stem from the fact that the decisions are being made in an emotional way. And if we want to create a real difference, if we want to get real results and actually serve the horses and do what is best for the horses, right, we have to make logical decisions that prioritize the horse's well-being. And these emotional-based decision systems, styles, where people are okay with making concrete decisions that will directly impact horses based on emotions of what makes people feel good or don't feel good, pops up exactly in the wild Mustangs. The exact problem where these wild Mustangs are starving to death on the range, they're overpopulated, they're getting inbred, they're destroying the natural landscape, they're struggling to find water, all stems from the fact that decisions are being influenced by emotional-based decisions. And I cannot discuss the Mustang predicament in just one video. So we're going to do, and I'm going to do a series on this wild Mustang issue and dive into the factual problems that we face, because there's a lack of stewardship. There's a lack of management, a lack of objective decision making, where the Mustangs are getting the short end of the stick, where there's approximately 125 to 150,000 excess horses. There are horses that are living their life, horses that were born out in the wild, that are sitting in a feedlot until they die. That's not good stewardship. That is not a good quality of life. And there are wild Mustangs out on the range that will die of dehydration because there's not enough water, or there's no water at all for them to be able to get to. There's horses that will starve to death because there's not enough forage for them. There are horses that will die because they were crippled, because they were born crippled, because they're inbred. It's a lack of mismanagement, a lack of stewardship. And that has all come to a forefront because the decisions that have been made around managing the wild horses have been influenced by people, number one, that know nothing about wild horses, usually, but number two, are highly emotional. And they're not making logical, factual, objective decisions that put the horse at the forefront. And I will tell you, this will come from the standpoint, this series that we're going to do comes to the forefront that I want the horses, I want wild horses out there. Just don't want too many of them. Because too many of them creates problems. Not enough of them actually can create problems too, because of the natural landscape. And we're going to dive into this. I can't go into this all in one video. I'm not going to do it on this video either, but we're going to be doing a series around this. And if you guys haven't, I highly encourage you to go check out a series, a docu-series from Western Justice called Love to Death. And it's on the feral horses, the wild horses, if you will, out west. Talking with ranchers, talking with people that are involved in it, talking about the real issues, and they have amazing footage in this series. And it's super entertaining, right? So if you made it this far in one of my particular videos, I'd highly encourage you, almost in preparation for our Mustang series, on having these uncomfortable conversations, of having truth-oriented conversations that is focused around providing real understanding so that we can take real actions to get real results that has the horse's best interest in mind. We can do this on the rescue side. We can do this in the Mustang side. But it comes down to us making the decisions that prioritize the stewardship of these horses in both scenarios. When we as humans make emotional-based decisions that prioritize our own feelings, or what we do want to feel or what we don't want to feel, the horse gets screwed in the process. And that's not good stewardship. We have to put our own desires aside. We have to prioritize the horses. And when we prioritize and serve the horses, now I'm not saying that the horse is an idol, right? The horse is something we've been given dominion over to manage, to steward. We can do that in a way that serves the horse and serves us and serves everyone around us, because God blessed us with them, and I'm thankful for that. Beyond the information being informative or interesting, I really hope that from this you go take action. You go find an organization in your area that is worthy of supporting, and you do your due diligence, and then you go all in on supporting them however you can, whether it's giving $5 a month, or giving $50 one time, or donating your time, or writing them a $25,000 check. I know there's some of you that can do that. And go find an organization that is worthy of supporting, because the ones that are doing the good work, because it takes us not just talking about this, but it takes us actually going out and taking action. And I'm going to continue doing these uncomfortable conversations. I read your comments. If you got your thoughts, share them down below. A lot of times I can use that as inspiration for future uncomfortable conversations, because there's uncomfortable things that we have to talk about that have been avoided for far too long, and it has created so many issues in our industry. And the truth is what is important, right? Many people will try to spread emotional lies about certain issues, and they have to work so hard at it. But when we sit down and we have a real conversation about the facts and about the truth, and we share that with other people, many of us can come together and realize we're not the few, but we're actually the majority. And I do this because we are called to steward these horses. I want to leave this industry a better place than I found it. I'm raising up young kids in this industry. I want them to have an industry. If they decide to stay in the horse industry, I want them to have an industry that is better than what I stepped into. And I think that that's what we're called to do. We're here to make this life a better place for these horses, for future generations, to improve the opportunity and the effectiveness of what we do in this industry, right? And we can achieve our personal objectives while still serving the horses, while still setting this up for the next generation. And I believe that's totally possible. And if it costs me a couple followers, if it costs me, I don't care if it costs me 10,000, it's costing me tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds, probably even hundreds of thousands of dollars in having these conversations. I have people message me, we'll never do business with you again, or we would never do business with you. And I was like, that's fine, because I would have said something at some point that was uncomfortable for you. And if you don't like the truth, I can't help you. So those of us that are committed to sharing the truth and speaking the truth and acting on the truth and being true disciples, we got to take action. We got to be disciplined. And so that's who this is for. If you're someone that is committed to being a good steward, to being a good disciple, to going out and doing what we're called to do and serving our horses and serving those around us, I'm glad to have you here. And I want to encourage you to use your voice and to share this conversation with other people and to go take action and actually put this to work. Because, we can faith without works is dead. We can have faith that all this is true. We can have belief and understanding that all this is true. But if we don't go do anything with it, it's dead. It goes nowhere. So I don't put this out here to just talk about it. I put this out here so that we can go do something about it. If you're going to talk about it, go be about it. So with that being said, I want to see you guys on the next video. Go take action. Let us know if you know some more good organizations that are worthy of supporting, and make sure you vetted them. You feel free to tag them down below.